all taught about American history in our public schools, but I think it's only really a slice of what America is about.
I'm a history buff, and I didn't know most of the stories that we're telling you on this series.
What are they wearing?
I struggled trying to piece together this American and Muslim identity my entire life. I'm really excited about having an answer.
It was the only community that built a permanent mosque.
One of the first times we have an African American owning property in his own name. So
it's amazing.
It's really not surprising that Muhammad Khan would have been injured here.
It's borderline miraculous that he wasn't killed.
Knowing that Thomas Jefferson had a Quran would have been huge.
The United States is not a monolith. It's made up of everyone.
Hello and welcome. We're so glad you could be here with us tonight. My name is Elizabeth Gardner, and I oversee educational video production for history, social studies, and civics curriculum on PBS Learning Media. I was also part of the team that created the new American Muslims, A History Revealed collection on PBS Learning Media, based on the PBS digital documentary series, which we will be discussing tonight, and for which you just saw the trailer. I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, Zaheer Ali, the executive producer of the American Muslims, A History Revealed series, exploring major moments of United States history through the lived experiences of American Muslims, as told through archival sources, historic sites, and scholarly research. Zaheer is an educator and historian with over a decade of directing nationally recognized public history and cultural heritage initiatives. As the oral historian at Brooklyn Historical Society, now Center for Brooklyn History, from 2015 to 2020, he directed the Muslims in Brooklyn Public History and Arts Initiative, and his work on Muslim histories in the United States has been featured in multiple films and television series. Currently, he is the executive director of the Hutchins Center for Civics at the Lawrenceville School, a secondary education initiative advancing civic education through scholarship, programming, and experiential learning. Zaheer also served as an advisor, working in close collaboration with our team to produce educational media resources from the American Muslims, A History Revealed series. Zaheer, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Zaheer, can you tell us what was your goal in making American Muslims, A History Revealed?
So there were many, but I think I can collapse them down into three main points. One is that Muslims have a long history in the United States. And so one of the lenses with which we approached this work was, I think a lot of times we talk about this as inclusive storytelling, and I really appreciated in the last session how Sue said inclusive and expansive. Because these are stories that they're already there. They've always been there. They just haven't been seen or heard or read because our frame has been too narrow. And so what we needed to do is expand our frame to reveal stories that have always been there, that Muslims have been part of the American story from the very beginning. That's one. The second is that the group of people that we call Muslims are incredibly diverse. These stories span time, they span geography, they span people, and so for people who, when they see the series, they're going to encounter people from different parts of the world and from the United States. They're going to travel through different parts of the country and different time periods. And the final thing, and this is the most important, is that this, the series is called American Muslims, but this is not just about American Muslims. We didn't seek to translate who are American Muslims. We wanted us to explore actually who and what is America. And that the only way to understand America is by exploring the stories of all of the people that have made up that American story, including Muslims. So this is American history.
Great. Could you please describe the narrative approach employed in the series? Why did the producing team decide to structure the series in this way?
We basically identified key moments in American history. Again, going back to that point that this is American history. We identified key moments in American history and wove into those key moments the essential but unknown, sometimes surprising stories of Muslim Americans. And so by doing that, that weaving in revealed that within the American story, the fabric of race, of religion, of nationality, these themes that are brought to the surface in much starker and clearer relief by bringing out these stories. The other thing that we wanted to do was move from a kind of abstract figure. A lot of times, and certainly this is just with underrepresented groups, but certainly with Muslims in the United States, is that they become a kind of figure. This kind of unknown figure that you can attach all of these kinds of ideas and stereotypes to and generalizations. And so we moved from an abstract telling to the lived experiences of actual people. So we identified people who lived in the times that we're looking at, who help us understand the American Revolution and the ideology of American freedom, help us understand the Civil War, help us understand the waves of immigration, help us understand the Great Migration. And so we move from abstract learning to the lived experience. And then finally, each of the episodes has a seeker. We had 3 American Muslim journalists who each helmed 2 episodes. And so by having a seeker, we kind of highlight this is shared learning, this is shared discovery, because these are American Muslims who are also discovering these stories. This is, we are all learning together these stories. And so that's the reason and how we structured it.
Wonderful, and that's a great setup for the clip that we're about to watch. So we're going to watch a clip now, and we're going to learn about Muslim soldier Muhammad Khan's struggles to receive his pension and be recognized for his service in the Civil War.
For Muhammad Khan, the war was over, but a new challenge had begun to rebuild his life as a civilian. By this time, his wife had arrived from South Asia, and Khan tried to make a living as a peddler, selling beads, baskets, and herbal medicine. All the while, he struggled with the wounds he received in the war and fought for his rights as a veteran, too.
Is it typical to struggle to get your pension?
Yes. So they required either direct evidence, documentation that you had served and were wounded and deserved a pension, or were sick and deserved a pension, or you needed a lot of testimony. He could produce neither. He went through a lot of hassle getting this one. So he talked to the pension office, talked to congressmen. He lived in the District of Columbia, so he was in the halls of Congress, knocking on doors, asking for favors, getting assistance. He was what they would consider a great pest, in the sense that he was there all the time. Everyone knew him. They did all kinds of favors trying to get records for him. They contacted the Secretary of War eventually. And they loaned him money. A lot of black soldiers from the Civil War did work in the pension office. And that's who he actually borrowed money from when he would come to these offices. They really felt for him. They knew his struggle was genuine.
Do you think his race factored into his struggle to get his pension?
Absolutely. He received a lot more pushback and had to enlist the help of all these powerful people to assist him.
Khan fought for over 20 years to receive the pension he was due. But the laborious process generated the paperwork that allows us to reconstruct his story. The pages became his history. When he died in 1891, Khan was buried in Cypress Hills National Cemetery, Brooklyn, under the name the Army gave him, not his own. Here he lies among 4,000 other Civil War veterans, white soldiers, and members of the U.S. colored troops.
I'm getting goosebumps knowing that we're close. 5009. There it is. John Amahai, New York. We found it.
So Zaheer, can you tell us about how you researched and picked the personal stories like that of Muhammad Khan that ground each episode?
Sure. For building out the series, we followed the research process. We did lit review, read widely, covered much of the scholarship. We talked to people, we talked to scholars who've been working on these histories to identify what the key themes were, what the key debates in the field are, and who were some of the key people. Now, some of the people were widely known. There are figures in, not necessarily this episode, but other episodes that are like widely known. So they deserved the attention. Others like this one were not so well known, but was well documented. The 200 pages in the pension file. And so we looked for stories of people that we could build out of doing the historical research, the documentation. We also looked for people who, so there's always this thing when you're doing kind of biography-based storytelling. Some people call it the problem of exemplarity. And that's the challenge of having someone whose story is so unique and stands out, but then it becomes just a story of them. How does that tell a wider story? And so these are exceptional people, but the conditions that they live in and the forces that they have to grapple with are not exceptional to them, right? And so these are unique people who are experiencing what many people experience. So that's how we kind of threaded that needle between these like unique biographies, but also situating them in a social and historical context that many people were experiencing. And then, you know, some of this is just surprising. This figure, Muhammad Khan, was from Afghanistan, variously identified as like Persian, when he came to the United States, he was mistaken for being indigenous, for African American, and that's part of how his story kind of shows and blows up, like how races collapsed in the United States. And the last thing is that the figures that we picked are neither heroes nor victims. They're people who were living. And a lot of times I think we think about history as, you know, the great man story, but these are just, you know, he was just trying to get his pension. He had no idea that 100 and some odd years later, his quest to get his pension would be the basis for our rewriting of that chapter in American history.
I think those personal stories also make it so accessible for students to engage with the history.
Absolutely.
And these clips, this media. Okay, so we're gonna watch another clip now. This one is about America's oldest purpose-built mosque in Ross, North Dakota, that served as a center of religious and cultural life for American Muslim settlers.
Our home has always been a gathering place for the Syrian folk. Not many parties or celebrations were held, except for occasions like a wedding or such. Before we built our church, the mosque, we held services at the different homes. We have a month of fasting, after which everyone visits the home of another, and there is a lot of feasting.
They're not the majority of the population, but they have a critical mass so that they're visiting each other. These Muslims, they're praying together, they're celebrating Eid together. Somebody in the community plays the oud.
No way.
Yeah, somebody is really good at singing, and during the Prophet's birthday, the Mawlid al-Nabi, somebody is singing nasheeds or praise songs to the Prophet.
There is a robust history and life to Arab Muslims in this region, and it's a lot more vibrant and diverse than we imagine it to be. The Jummas are an illustration of that kind of social life.
There's something very spiritual about being out here that you can really feel, and I can imagine that Mary Joma's attachment to Islam only grew stronger just for seeing the sunset and hearing the birds, and it's that part of the story that you can't get unless you show up and you walk where she walked.
So there was a mosque in North Dakota. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Because I can't even picture one.
There were more Muslims in the Dakotas per capita than any other place in the United States among these Arabic-speaking immigrants. But this was unique in that it was the only community that built a permanent mosque.
Oh, what did that look like?
Let me show you.
No way.
You ever seen a mosque like that?
Never. It's sturdy. They built it well.
Oh, yeah.
Where I am in New Jersey, there's no purpose-built mosques at all.
The mosque that I used to go to growing up was a commerce building. This is like an American mosque.
The Jumas wanted to create a center for community, for cultural community activity. And the mosque is not just a prayer space. The mosque is a gathering space.
I think for the non-Muslims, probably it was received both ways. It was received as a commitment to the community. These people are here to stay. We want them to be here. They're contributing. We need them. But for others, it was probably perceived as a concern. Are they going to assimilate? Are they going to become American? Or will they remain these outsiders with their strange religious practices?
It was also a way of becoming American. Now, this may surprise people because you think, well, isn't assimilation about forgetting that difference? No, 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 no. Especially not in the Midwest. In order to be a good American in the Midwest, you need to have a religious congregation. Everybody has one. Ashkenazi Jews have one. Sephardi Jews, the Lutherans, the Polish Roman Catholics, you name it. And so they build theirs and add it to the tapestry of the Dakotas.
That totally changes my idea of what North Dakota might have been like.
People have the wrong idea, in particular, about the Midwest.
Be an example where something where I was really learning something new when I watched that. I didn't know. So Zaheer, can you talk about, obviously the audience can see that primary sources and historical documents are featured within the films. Why did you want to emphasize the historical process that way through visits to the archives and using primary sources to trace people's lives?
This is, for people familiar with finding your roots, right? This is like finding our roots. This is doing a genealogy of America and uncovering these stories in documentation that was contemporaneous to these people, right? So we're not making this up. We're not, this is, especially in a moment where critical media and literacy studies are so important, and what are the sources, what are the citations? I think it was really important for us to demonstrate to students how history is not only how it happens, but how the study of it is done. And the other thing is that what I really like about this clip is where he says, like, you actually like to stand in this place, right? That history is not just something that you can get documented in, a piece of paper that has been languishing in an archive somewhere. It is an embodied, it is embodied. It is in the place. You go to the place. The place holds a story. Buildings hold a story. Certainly these documents hold a story. And then the other thing is that, especially when you're trying to uncover or recover the stories of people who have been written out of the narrative, we do have to go to non-traditional documentation, right? There's an oral history here that is the basis of this, a pension file. Another one looks at a portrait, someone's diary, a photograph. There are many ways that history is documented, and I think what we hope to do is to inspire and invite people's curiosity into the many ways that history and where in places that history can be found, and also thinking about our own ways of how we document ourselves and what kind of traces are we leaving for generations beyond us to find.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're going to watch the final clip, and this is from the episode How Muslims Influenced Thomas Jefferson and America's Founders.
Jefferson's commitment to the idea that all citizens should be free to practice their religion as they choose can be seen in a bill he wrote for the Virginia State Legislature in 1777, a document that's thought to have shaped the religious clauses in the Bill of Rights. Some founders argued that the government should favor Protestant Christians over all other traditions, but Jefferson was clear. In his autobiography, he stated that his law included the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and the Mohammedan, the Hindu and the infidel of every denomination.
So at the very foundation of this country, there was one of the founding fathers imagining Muslim Americans.
Absolutely. He understands that's going to happen.
To think about Muslims as future citizens was a way of imagining a completely new nation that included more than just Christians, particularly Protestant Christians.
bringing Muslims into the conversation, mentioning them in documents. There's some foreshadowing of the hopes and aspirations of what the country could become.
Jefferson clearly thought about Muslims in theory. In practice, he had little contact. Documents from the time record just one meeting with a Muslim man here in the United States, which took place while Jefferson was president.
In 1805, the first Muslim ambassador to the United States arrived from Tunis. We were in the middle of an undeclared war that Thomas Jefferson had waged against Tripoli. Tunis was an ally of Tripoli. So the Tunisian ambassador was sent to negotiate with President Jefferson. He was dressed in finery of all sorts of brocade, gold, scarlet, and he had a diamond snuff box that was the talk of the town. Whereas a New Hampshire senator who was at this meeting said that Jefferson appeared scruffy by comparison. Jefferson received him at a state dinner that he set the time for at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Well, someone let it be known that Meli Meli is obviously Muslim and it's Ramadan. And Jefferson doesn't skip a beat. He says, okay, then dinner will begin precisely at sundown.
Which indicates that Jefferson learned from his Quran and from other books about what Muslims believe.
And Meli Meli arrives very shortly after sundown, and then they break bread and have an iftar dinner. This is often referred to as the first iftar dinner in the White House, and it's happening in Jefferson's presidency.
Jefferson's treatment of Meli Meli is revealing. Here was a man of power and influence from a part of the world the founders associated with Islam. This made him very different from the many Muslims already living here by this time.
The founders are thinking about Islam and they're thinking about Muslims, but they're thinking about the kind of great centers of Islamic learning and power in what we now call the Middle East. They're not thinking about Muslims who are in the new United States. Thousands upon thousands of enslaved African Muslims being shipped to the Americas.
Many of the places from which people were horrifically taken in West Africa were places impacted by Islam. And so the people who were brought to America, estimates range from thousands to tens of thousands, were Muslim.
There is evidence for the presence of enslaved African Muslims. You see it in runaway advertisements. You also see it in plantation records of slave names. We actually do have a few narratives that have been penned by African Muslims enslaved here, and some of them are written in Arabic.
There's no firm evidence of Muslim presence at Monticello. But this was a plantation where Jefferson, the person who wrote that all men are created equal, enslaved over 400 people over his lifetime.
How do the stories featured in American Muslims, A History Revealed, impact our understanding of American history?
Well, I just want to say that this was the hardest episode to do because there's so much complexity to this story, complexity to who Thomas Jefferson was, complexity to how he understood Muslims, and we were, this was the one episode where it was not necessarily about like two individuals or an individual, but it was about these ideas. So really two books. There's the Quran, the copy of the Quran that Jefferson owns, and then there's this book which in the series explores the autobiography of Omar ibn Said, who was an enslaved person who wrote his life in Arabic. And I think the reason why this episode was so hard, and to your question, is that the series points and brings to the surface this journey that has to happen between the promise that is America and the actual practice, right? A gap that needs to be bridged. And these aren't stories of, typically when people do these stories, they want to like do contributionism, like, oh, here are all the things that Muslims gave to America to demonstrate our value and right to be here. And everyone, like no one has to contribute anything to have to be here, right? And so we moved from this kind of contributionism frame to transformation, that the stories of Muslims, the presence of Muslims in the United States transform America even as they too are transformed. So this is not just these aren't just stories of how people become American. This is a story of America's becoming, which is an ongoing process that happens through struggle, that happens through engagement, that happens through relationships, that happens through the actions of these people. And this is really what we wanted to showcase, that the story of America is a story that is ongoing. It is a story that is still happening. And that in order for us to understand where that story has come from, we have to recover these stories of the past.
Makes it such a good fit as well for the U.S. History Collection, where we're very aligned in our mission. So to that point, our final question, can you tell us about how the series was designed specifically to appeal to young and diverse learners?
Sure. Well, initially the series was imagined as like a 2-hour epic. And having been in the classroom myself, I know that teachers are often looking for more bite-sized pieces. Having worked with young people who grew up on social media, the attention span is attuned to shorter clips. And so we shifted from 2 hours to 6 20-minute episodes. And even with that, like, we're very happy to partner with GBH and PBS Learning Media to come up with these clips to even make it more accessible. So one was, kind of making the stories more accessible in that way in terms of size. The other thing that we wanted to do was not try to add on to or replace curriculum that people have to cover. And so we are covering stories that you already have to cover. People have to teach the Civil War. They have to teach, the debates around religious freedom and the amendments to the Constitution. They have to teach immigration and the settlement of the Great Plains. They have to teach the Great Migration. This gives people another way to cover that. I think we still held on to the kind of epic feel of storytelling to attract and kind of draw learners into a time, into a world, into a space. And we wanted to show how dynamic these histories are and how dynamic the work of history is by showing these seekers going out, and it's almost like a quest, going out throughout the land, picking up this archival document here, this image here, this oral history there, and how do you piece that together to tell this story?
Yeah, you really feel like you're discovering the story along with the host. I think it's a really powerful element of the series. Wonderful. Thank you, Zaheer.